Now that we've discussed what the advantages of cloud computing are, we should highlight some of the concerns organizations have. These concerns were discussed by different presenters at the conference. I should note, however, that more organizations are citing that the advantages are now outweighing the disadvantages, as they are able to mitigate a lot of these things. So really there's four main areas I want to discuss, and that really I found a lot of people brought up during the conference, and they are the issues of security, control, performance, and support. Really one of the big things that was talked about quite a lot at the conference was really security, and specifically in relation to data sovereignty. Now, with government organizations, obviously, they need to protect private information. So was a lot of discussion around basically really hosting individuals' information with a third party and how that could be secured. Now, uh, one organization, to give you an example, was looking to use Amazon in order to host their data. However, they found out that at the time, apparently data was only backed up to Singapore. Well, data was actually hosted in Australia, but it was backed up to Singapore. So the actual data being backed up to Singapore was an issue and a barrier for them adopting the cloud. However, apparently now that's changed. Data is now backed up in Australia as well, so that could actually go ahead. So really, the issues around data sovereignty were really, making sure that the data was stored with a reputable company, that there was security in place, and also there's still the emphasis with keeping the data onshore and in onshore data centers. Most government organizations really didn't want to let that data out of the country, so that was really an important consideration for them. Obviously, another issue a lot of organizations had was the fact that, again, with storing the information with a third party company, well, how could they secure it? Okay, and that was definitely discussed. But really, I guess the organizations discussed it in a sense, well, is it really that much safer? Having some IT guy you've hired looking after your data than maybe someone, a cloud provider, is hired, really, if you actually, trust that provider and they really are a reputable provider, then there really wasn't a big difference in that. Another big area that was highlighted was the fear of vendor lock-in. Now, of course, with everything hosted on site and applications developed, by you, really you had complete control over that application. But the fear is that when you actually outsource your application to a third-party supplier, using software as a service, you actually no longer have control over that application. So the issue is, well, what if something happened to that company? Well, how would we continue to run, you know, the application at all? Well, I guess a lot of organizations really did fear that, and that was something they had to investigate. Some organizations actually adopted to have some sort of backup system where they could export their data and import it into an application that was hosted on site. Support was definitely another issue that came up, making sure that correct SLAs were in place, and making sure that the vendor, the cloud vendor, understood exactly what was required of them in order to provide the support to customers. There was actually an issue that one company had with hosting data in the US. Um, the company in the US actually had specified downtime, and that downtime happened to be during a really bad time for that organization. Assuming it wasn't a bad time with the US, it must have been at midnight, something like that. But within Australia, this actually happened during business hours, so that actually had to be rearranged um, to better suit the company within Australia. Performance, obviously another issue there. Obviously, with a cloud-hosted application, you're reliant upon the internet there and internet speed. So ensuring that you get the correct performance and adequate performance was definitely a key issue in people's minds. Availability was definitely another issue that was brought up there, in the sense that obviously if something's hosted on site, then even if you lose your connection to the internet, then at least you can still do some form of work. However, when everything's hosted offsite, there's obviously that reliant upon that internet connection in order to do any type of work. So that's definitely another issue that was brought out by organizations. Although I guess that is not so much an issue nowadays because basically everything really is reliant upon you having an internet connection, be able to connect to the internet. So organizations aren't seeing that as such a big issue nowadays. Okay, so I'd like now to move on to the current industry trends. I'd like to discuss now some different technologies that are emerging. Hopefully, you'll get some ideas of cloud technologies that you can deliver in your class. I'm going to split the technologies into different layers of the cloud client stack to help better understand how organizations are using them. So a few ones we're going to talk about are IaaS, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. So on this slide here, we've actually got this slide from one of the presenters. He works for Ovum.com, which does a lot of research around the IT industry, and he's really gone through some of the main cloud service providers and has identified which agencies within Australia are actually making use of these. And it's mainly talking about here government organisations and which cloud technologies they're using. So really, we can see one of the big one here is Amazon Web Services, which is all about infrastructure as a service. So these companies would actually pay per use or per use of resources to Amazon. I will discuss Amazon Web Services in a bit more detail a lot later because it definitely seems to be where the industry is headed. Another large one here, which I'm going to discuss in a bit more depth as well, is Google Apps. So there's quite a few companies, as you can see, that are using it. There's NZ Post, New South Wales Department of Trade and Investment, and Education and Training, and also like a lot of universities are actually making use of Google Apps for their students. They're finding it a very good way of actually, allowing students to use Word and Office features and to be able to share them and collaborate quite well. So we'll talk more about Google Apps as well, as this is a large one's taking off. Salesforce, we can see down the bottom, a lot of organizations are actually using Salesforce. So this is a CRM, and there's a lot of other types of things like that that organizations are using, such as ERP software in the cloud or ERP apps. And a few other ones I've got here: Microsoft Azure, it's again IaaS, Microsoft's Dynamics CRM, another type of CRM there, Microsoft Online Services, so really we're talking about Office 365 there. Again, a lot of education institutions are using that. A lot of private organizations are using Office 365 as well. You can access your Word and everything as you normally would through that, and also you have the ability of having a hosted exchange through that as well, which is definitely an advantage for a lot of organizations. So I thought I'd show this slide here just to give you a few examples of some of the, or down the left hand side, a few examples of some cloud technologies, what type of category they fall in, and also what agencies are making use of that. And now I'd actually like to go in and discuss a little bit more about some of these specific technologies listed here, and really talk about how you might actually implement them in your class and how you might deliver training around them. Okay, so now that I've given you a few examples, I'd like to talk about Google Apps for Business. Now, this particular cloud offering is actually an example of software as a service. Now, there's a few features that Google Apps for Business can deliver. Now, really the main features that it delivers are Gmail, so obviously you can have your email stored online. You can have up to 25 gigs of storage of Google Apps for Business per user. Also, you can have custom email addresses, so a business can have their own custom email address for their organization hosted on Google Apps for Business. We've also got different items like calendar there, so you can have, everyone can collaborate via the calendar, Google Drive for storage, Google Docs, Google Sheets, which is kind of like Excel Google Slides, which is very similar to PowerPoint. Of course, the advantage of Google Apps here is that everything can be accessed through the browser without the need to install any software. So this one here is really a fantastic one that you can really show your students how to set up and really to get their mind around how the cloud works. Really, if you're going to deliver in this class, there's a few procedures that you can go through to set this up. So you'd actually need to purchase a domain, which they can be purchased quite cheaply for a few dollars. You then need to set up the Google Apps for Business account, and then you need to set up DNS for the mail and whatnot. And really, what this then gives, it really gives the students an overview of how to set up a cloud computing product. And also, when you get into setting it up, you're also going to learn how to manage it, so the students are going to get skills around that as well. And if we have a look at the Google Apps for Business website, I'll show you the back end of the system just quickly. Okay, so when you actually log into the Google Apps for Business account, basically after you've already set up your domain, which will be the first step, you set up your DNS. You'll then go through and configure all the mail settings. And after you've done that, then it's really quite easy to work with. It's just basically a matter of creating an account for each individual user, which we have down here. They'll then get their own custom email address as well, which they can log on to through Gmail, and it can also be added to Outlook and everything like that. And of course, as cloud computer, you can access everything through the browser. They can access their mail through the browser, via that mail dot and then the domain name. And then also they're going to get access to all the drives, the Google Calendar, etc. It's very easy just to organize and manage, and it's really important to show a student the back end so they understand how to manage a software as a service product, which is really that. Of course, some of the management is going to be different between different vendors, but as long as they understand the concepts. And if you look at the marketplace here as well, it's another reason why it's so good. We'll quickly go over there. If I've got it open, I'll just open it up. Okay, with Google Apps for Business, you can also add a lot of different software as a service products and directly tap them into it. So, I've got access to the default apps, but if I want to add in there some customer management apps, some productivity apps, I can add them in there. A few examples here, we can add in an accounting and finance app, Zero Accounting if you heard of that before, a CRM app, and for my business personally, I use Google Apps for Business, and I have a help desk app in there, which really helps me. And of course, again, there's no installation. It's just basically plug and play. You add it in there, you log on with your Google Apps for Business account, and then you just use the product. And one of the main advantages there again is you don't need to worry about installing any software, and you don't need to worry about any application updates, as it just updates automatically, and all the security and everything is taken care of for you. So again, Google Apps for Business, I highly recommend really delivering this in the class and getting the students to investigate it and see how it works. It's fantastic for them to learn about cloud technology. Okay, so now I'd like to talk about Amazon Web Services. So really, what is Amazon Web Services? And we're specifically talking about Amazon Web Services EC squared, or sorry, EC2, which is referred to as Amazon Elastic Compute Cloud. So it's their cloud computing product. Well, really what it allows you to do is AWS allows you to rent space on their physical boxes and virtualized environment. So basically, this is an example of a infrastructure as a service product whereby you can just rent space on their server and you're charged per how many resources you use. Really good advantage of this is that you can scale it as required. You don't need to purchase any hardware yourself. You can simply just scale up or scale the resources down as required and according to your application, and you'll only be charged for this. So really, you're only charged for the resources that you use. They also have auto scaling, whereby it will automatically scale up or scale down according to the needs of your application. Also, it's managed directly through a web interface, so you can manage your AWS offering directly through the browser. But I really encourage you guys to actually go to this link I've got here under training. If you copy that into your browser, It's really like a short introduction to AWS. It's a training course, a really short course that they've prepared that you can go through. And I really recommend it, especially if you don't do anything else, watch the video entitled Traditional Computing versus AWS video, because that's really going to help you understand what AWS does. And really, I'd encourage you also to get your students to work through that, because if they work through that, they're going to understand AWS, and if they understand AWS, they're going to understand infrastructure as a service and how that works and how that can be managed. If you're looking for courses in AWS, you might consider the AWS 101 training course, which could be a good option. I was talking to some people at the conference in a discussion, and really I asked the question of them. I said, well, where do you see cloud computing going? What do you see, the next big thing in cloud computing? And really, one of them said, well, the next 3 years, they think that Amazon Web Services is really going to be a big player. Organizations are probably going to move from having it internally hosted to having it hosted in products such as AWS EC2. So, really, with that in mind, I really definitely encourage you to get your students into it and really teach them about it. And you can actually set up a free version of AWS EC2, so you can basically rent a micro server from them, a very low resource Linux server, and you get something like a 700 hours free or something like that. So that's something you could actually do and get your students to have a play around with them and actually manage that as well, and that'd be very beneficial. Okay, so I'd like just to finish off this presentation just talking about a few key job skills, and I'm only just going to briefly touch on this. So basically, we're going to talk about what skills IT students really need moving into this new marketplace. Really, one of the key things that came out at the conference in my mind was the need for business-minded IT people. IT people who can go into an organization, understand that business, and then match appropriate products for them. And when I say products, I mean cloud products. So they can go into an organization, understand the needs, and then say, well, you need this software as a service product, or you need this infrastructure as a service product. And really, for them to be able to do that, I mean, they obviously have to have an understanding of business, but they also have to have an understanding of the variety of cloud products available. So we need to be providing training in different products. They also need to understand how to plan for the cloud. So how to plan the implementation of cloud and manage things such as cloud risk, which is another area that I've got there. And risk management is definitely a big thing around cloud, as cloud risk is right at the top of a lot of people's minds when they're looking at implementing it. Cloud setup is also an important thing. They need to know how to actually set up the cloud and configure it for an organization to get it working correctly. And then, of course, cloud management. So how to manage the cloud once it's all set up and running. They definitely do need skills around that. And of course, like I talked about, by showing the students how to use things like Google Apps for Business, which is a software as a service product, and showing them how to use Amazon EC2. I mean, these things are really going to help them with a lot of these things I've got here. So it's going to really teach them how to set it up, how to plan for it, and then once it's running, how to manage it.